Hi guys, and welcome to what is most likely going to be the last video of its kind for a while. I have decided that I'd like to change my routine, or change out of a routine is more accurate, because I don't really like these monthly wrap-ups or even bi-monthly wrap-ups, and I feel like I'm unnecessarily restricting myself with a strict routine like that, and from now on I just want to talk about books when they come. Or if I don't have enough to say about each book that I read, then I will group them when it makes sense, or just not talk about them, because it's not like I have to talk about each book that I read on here. But this video is still going to be a traditional wrap-up, and it's a big one because it contains the reading rush. So I have 9 books to talk about, or 8 books and 1 trilogy, which I will count as 1 book. I'm going to start with the reading rush books because unexpectedly I ended up fulfilling some of the challenges of the reading rush, which I hadn't planned on doing and which happened accidentally. The books just happened to fulfill the challenges, but since they did, I might as well point it out. So my first book is La muerte y la doncella by Ariel Dorfmann. This fulfilled the challenge to read a book from a genre that you've always wanted to read more of, because this is a play, and I've wanted to read more plays for a while. Or actually, I've wanted to watch more plays, but reading them is the next best thing. So this play by this Chilean author was written in 1991 in reaction to the first testimonies that were recorded and published by torture victims from the time of the dictatorship. These testimonies were just beginning to get published when the country was beginning to go through its weird and slow democratization process. In the center of the play are a married couple, Gerardo and Paulina, and Gerardo comes home to tell Paulina that he has just been appointed by the president as a member of the commission that is going to investigate the crimes committed under the dictatorship. Investigate as in record testimonies of the torture victims, not as in dole out punishments. Because in fact, the people who committed these crimes are still largely in power in this weird new political hybrid system. Gerardo has actually a strong motivation for this job because his wife Paulina is actually a torture victim. She was tortured and raped by a medical doctor to the music of the piece Death and the Maiden by Schubert, hence the title. But it turns out that Gerardo is going to have to do this job a little bit sooner than anybody expected, because the matter is suddenly brought to his own doorstep when fate delivers Paulina's torturer into their own house. This is quite a straightforward piece of writing without any flourishes and decorations and with very few plot twists. And in the end, it is about the age-old question of what is better and more beneficial in the long run for society as a whole, but also for the individuals. Forgiving and forgetting on the one hand, or remembering and reckoning on the other hand. This is actually a question that has come up for me at work several times. I'm an historian, and it seems that there is no one-size-fits-all answer for this. And the play doesn't even have an answer for its own case, which makes it a good play, in my opinion. And then there was the challenge to read a book completely outside. And for that, I read the fantasy novella Penrix Demon by Lois McMaster Bujold. This is a high fantasy novella set in Bujold's Kingdom of the Five Gods universe. And it is the first novella in a series, and in it the young protagonist, Penric, one day meets a dying sorceress on the road, and she transfers to him her demon. The demons are what gives sorcerers and wizards and the like power in this universe. And that way the backwater country lordling Penric suddenly becomes important, and the demon is his magical ticket to the capital and to a new life. I'm afraid I found this to be an extremely generic fantasy tale, and if you aren't either very new to the genre, or you actually like to read the same old stuff over and over again, I wouldn't know why I should recommend it to you. I think that most people who love this series, because it does get high ratings, I think most people who love it are actually fans of the wider Five Kingdoms universe. Five Gods. Kingdom of the Five Gods. Anyway, you know what I mean. The larger universe that Bujold has created, and so naturally they like the spin-off as well. But I skim-read it and I was still bored. And then the book whose title begins with the word the Wasteland and Other Poems by T.S. Eliot. And it's funny, in this collection, half of the poems left me completely indifferent, or I knew 3 lines in that they weren't for me and I moved on. But the other half I absolutely loved. These poems are all a bit dated, obviously, and it's a bit exhausting how T.S. Eliot compulsively shows off his classical education and his knowledge of the Bible in almost every poem. But there's still so much beauty in this. The overarching themes in this collection, I would say, are death, transience, time running out, and therefore nostalgia and melancholy. It has a very autumnal feel to it, so this would be a good autumn read, I think. And Wikipedia tells me that my birthstone is the topaz, which is dark red and can sometimes even seem black. So Jorge Luis Borges' Ficciones fit the description. This is a collection of 16 short stories by Jorge Luis Borges, which are all about exceedingly weird subjects, but Borges, or the narrators of the story, always ground these weird elements very firmly in reality, either by making it sound as if these things were related to them, the narrators, by other people, and giving them credibility this way, or by writing about them in a scholarly fashion and even citing made-up scholarly works about these subjects. And the effect of that is that even the most ludicrously weird stuff gains legitimacy and cannot be refuted within the logic of the story. Unfortunately, another effect is that it makes them mind-numbingly boring. And you can't help but wonder if this procedure was really necessary, or you can't help but be frustrated that it seemed necessary, when in fact, except for the last few hundred years in the West, people all over the world and through all of history have always been writing about weird and wonderful things as if they were true, because they do represent their truth. And it was only half a generation later, almost no time at all, that Argentinian and Latin American writers in general were very much able to utilize the wonderful and the fantastical in their writing in an organic way to tell their truth. So you cannot help but compare Borges to the only slightly younger Julio Cortázar, the other big Argentinian author, and the one who became a protagonist in that literary movement that brought about the so-called boom of Latin American literature. So comparing Borges and Cortázar isn't a new idea of mine. People are doing it left, right, and center. My position is that compared to Cortázar, Borges reads like a relic, like an ancient dinosaur, and Cortázar is more worth your while, I would say. Or that's what I would say on the basis of these cuentos and the Ficciones, because I haven't read anything else by Borges, to be honest. And in addition to Borges and Dorfmann, there's one other book that fulfills the challenge: read a book that is set on another continent. And it should come as no surprise that that continent is Australia. And the book doesn't just happen to be set in Australia, but might as well be set anywhere else. But it is about a very specifically Australian thing, namely Australian boarding school culture. And the book is On the Jellicoe Road by Melina Marchetta. This was, weirdly enough, published under the title Jericho Road in the US and the UK, or just the UK, I'm not sure. Anyhow, it seems like such a superfluous alteration of the title, Jericho Road instead of On the Jericho Road. It almost seems like they did this just to demonstrate their power or something. But if you have any explanation for why this alteration might have been necessary, please let me know. So the book opens with a passage told by a girl or a woman about how her father died in a car accident on the Jellicoe Road. The narration then jumps 22 years forward to 17-year-old Taylor, who is a senior in the Jellicoe boarding school. She is head of her house, and as such, she is very much invested in the turf wars that are going on between the Jellicoe boarding school, the town school, and the military school. But Taylor is also sometimes preoccupied with the question of what happened to her mother, who abandoned her when she was a young child on the Jellicoe Road. And while the story of Taylor's daily life is told, we get interspersed snippets told in the voice from the prologue about what happened after the accident and how the lives of 5 teenagers that are connected with it unfolded. And of course, in time, we find out how the two stories are connected and what connects Taylor to the incident on the Jellicoe Road. This had all the YA drama that you could possibly want. It was saved from being melodramatic by the impassive voice of the narrator. Taylor, who is the first-person narrator, is very good at disassociating and at repressing most of the time. But even so, to me it felt contrived, and obviously the plot of any novel is contrived, but I think you know what I mean. It was just a little too much. Too many drama plot lines came together. I can see how this would appeal to a teenager who has grown up reading YA literature, but for me it was entirely too much drama with too little takeaway. It didn't take away anything from this book, to be honest. So that was my reading rush. And in addition to that, I also continued my June trend and read some more about desolate Australian small towns with high crime rates, but this time the less trashy version. In Wimmera by Brandi, a body is found in a river in Victoria one day in the 1990s. And that is the point of departure for the book, to explore the lives of 2 11-year-old boys, 2 best friends, during one summer in the 1980s. This book is about how we as a society consistently fail to protect our weakest members. And then, if they take matters into their own hands and protect themselves, we punish them for it. The thing with this book is that its success and its impact and its significance hinge entirely upon the ending. Not in the sense that the ending makes you see everything that happened before in a different light, like The Usual Suspects or It Was All a Dream, but in the sense that up until the last few chapters, nothing really interesting or surprising happens in the book. There is nothing particularly surprising or original or engaging about the plot or the writing style, and unless you are very new to consuming media of any kind, you will have seen it all before. So to me, that made it a book to be appreciated for its message rather than to be actually enjoyed. On the whole, I'd still say it is a good book though. And then after months of stalling, I finally plowed all the way through Delirio by Laura Restrepo. And this was translated as Delirium in English and in German as well. In this story, which is set in Bogota in the 1980s, a man comes home from a weekend trip to find that his wife has lost her mind. He has to pick her up in a hotel room where she is sitting on the bed or on the floor even, in a catatonic state. And except for brief moments of lucidness, she remains in this state for weeks. And the story is all about uncovering what happened to her and what she saw or what she heard or what she experienced to put her into this state. So what drew me to this book was, for one, that the author seems to be the most decorated and most well-respected Colombian author since Gabriel Garcia Marquez. But also what intrigued me and made me pick it up is the way in which it is written. The narration changes seamlessly from first-person narration, from the perspective of four significant people in the woman's life, to third-person narration, so from direct speech to free indirect speech. This style of narration has been described as confusing by some people, but it really isn't if you just go with it, if you just go with the flow and don't let your reading be stalled every time the perspective changes. It only becomes an obstacle if you make it one. So I thought that this was excellent and fascinating. Unfortunately, everything else about the book was incredibly dull. There is no plot to speak of, and let us be clear, I wasn't expecting a thriller when I went into it, but I did expect there to be some plot. Apparently it is supposed to be a picture of Colombian society or the society of Bogota in the 1980s in a nutshell. But I've never seen this premise executed in such a dull fashion, and I was so disappointed because I love the style of the narration, and if only the content could have been half as fascinating. But to end this video on a more positive note, I have read some more books by Alexis Hall. So the first was Boyfriend Material that was released on the 7th of July. Now this awful cover was, it seems obvious to me that this was designed to appeal to the fans of Red, White and Royal Blue. But it doesn't have anything to do with the book. I mean, yes, the book is set in London, but it is not about London or about living in London or being English. And a cover like that would usually have sent me running, and I would never have picked up this book if I hadn't already been familiar with the author. But as it was one of my most anticipated releases of the year. This is a romance novel after the fashion of a 1990s rom-com movie, complete with the sappy storyline, in this case the fake dating trope coupled with the enemies to lovers trope, and it has the usual cast of exaggerated and archetypal side characters. The protagonist and narrator, Luc, who is actually half French, has been dragged, not for the first time, through the tabloids for behavior which would have only been mildly interesting or not interesting at all if he didn't have the misfortune of being the son of an aged famous rock star. And now Luc, who works as a fundraiser for a non-profit organization, unfortunately is the wrong kind of homosexual in the eyes of the potential donors that he has been cultivating. And so now he is in danger of losing his job. So he is looking for a respectable fake boyfriend who would make him appear respectable by proxy. And his best friend Bridget knows just the right kind of hyper-respectable, stuck-up single lawyer to do the job of fake boyfriend for Luc. This is an extremely cute and heartwarming story, but it has some serious undertones. It is basically an indictment of people's hypocrisy. And there are also some other serious issues, which are, however, of a more personal nature, personal to the main characters. So, in this regard, it is more serious than your typical 1990s rom-com movie. But on the other hand, it is also just as lighthearted. The best thing about it is hands down the voice of the narrator. Luc is delightfully sarcastic and self-deprecating. He's also adorably confused most of the time, and also endearingly honest, at least towards us, the reader. He has become my second most favorite character of Alexis Halls. My favorite character has become Arden St. Ives from the Arden St. Ives trilogy, which consists of the books How to Bang a Billionaire, How to Blow It with a Billionaire, and How to Belong with a Billionaire. So this is basically 50 Shades of Gay, except there appears to be a whole subgenre of the romance genre called the Billdom genre, the billionaire, about the billionaire dom. I haven't read anything else from this genre, so I can't tell how subversive this trilogy actually is, but it seems to me that Arden St. Ives, who is the main character and not the billionaire, that he is rather atypical in that he is not your usual innocent maiden, but he's actually the opposite, and he is all the time, he is trying, unsuccessfully at first, to get the billionaire to let out his kinky side at last. So that was very entertaining. It gets pretty dark in the second and the third book, though. I liked the trilogy very much as a whole. I had two major issues with it. One is to do with plotting, and I can't get into the specifics here. But the other is of a more general nature. I would have expected it to be more. I think it could have been more and it should have been more considering who the author is. And I would have expected both the author and the protagonist to be a bit more analytical and to ask what the billionaire being a billionaire actually means for their relationship and how much of a factor it is in the attraction that the protagonist feels towards the billionaire. But it was never an integral element in their interaction and in their relationship. It was almost incidental. And I thought that this was a bit disingenuous. However, the protagonist, Arden St. Ives, is the most adorable character that I have read in a long time, if not forever. He is sincere and warm-hearted and intense and just adorably cute the whole time, but he also has a very great character arc and learning curve, and he's just 20 years old in the beginning, and he very much grows up in the course of these three books. But he is adorable in the beginning and he stays adorable right through to the end. And if romance is at all your thing, I think you are missing out if you don't read this trilogy and don't get to know this absolutely adorable main character. So all is well that ends well, I guess. I hope that your July was just as packed with interesting books, and as always, if you've read any of these, I'd love to know what you thought about them. Please do let me know in the comments, and in any case, I'll see you very soon with another video. Bye!